The story of where we come from used to feel simple. You've probably seen the picture. It shows a line of figures starting with a hunched over ape. It slowly stands up straighter, becomes less hairy, and turns into us. A simple, straight line. A march of progress. This picture was easy to understand. It felt right. It put us at the very end, the peak of a long, steady climb. For a long time, that was the story science told. Each fossil discovery was a new point on that line. We found Lucy, an early ancestor who walked on two legs. We found Homo habilis, the handyman who made simple tools. Then Homo erectus, who tamed fire and walked out of Africa. Then the Neanderthals, our brutish cousins. And finally, us. Homo sapiens, the wise man, the winner. But that story is wrong. It's not just a little wrong, it's completely fundamentally wrong. The latest discoveries haven't just added a new figure to the line. They've erased the line completely. They've taken that neat, orderly drawing and replaced it with something else. Something much messier. Something more like a tangled bush or a braided river. A story of many different kinds of humans living at the same time, often in the same places. A story of them meeting, fighting, and sometimes having children together. The biggest reason for this new story isn't a new set of bones, it's a ghost. It's the ghost of ancient people preserved in their DNA. For decades, scientists dreamed of reading the genetic code of our extinct relatives. But it seemed impossible. DNA is a fragile molecule. It breaks down after death. After a few thousand years, it's just dust. Trying to read the DNA from a 50,000-year-old Neanderthal bone was like trying to reassemble a book that had been shredded, soaked in water, and buried in mud for centuries. But a few scientists, led by a man named Svante Pabo, refused to give up. They spent years in ultra-clean labs developing new methods. They drilled tiny bits of powder from ancient bones, trying to find fragments of DNA that hadn't rotted away. They fought against contamination, your own DNA, the DNA of the person who dug up the bone, the DNA of bacteria that lived in the soil, and it was everywhere. And ancient DNA was a whisper in a hurricane of modern genetic noise. Slowly, painfully, they did it. They found ways to isolate the whisper, they pieced together the fragments, and in 2010 they published the first draft of the Neanderthal genome. It was a stunning achievement. For the first time, we could read the genetic blueprint of an extinct human. And that's when the real shock came. They compared the Neanderthal genome to the genomes of people alive today. The old story said we came out of Africa, met the Neanderthals, and replaced them. We were better, smarter, and they simply vanished. But the DNA told a different story. The scientists found that every person today whose ancestors came from outside of Africa has Neanderthal DNA in their genome. About 1 to 2% of their DNA is from Neanderthals. Think about what that means. It means our ancestors didn't just replace them, they met them, and they had children with them. Those children who were part Homo sapiens and part Neanderthal survived. They had their own children who passed those genes down generation after generation all the way to us. We are the proof that Neanderthals didn't just die out, they merged with us. A part of them lives on inside billions of people today. This was a bombshell. The meat line between us and them dissolved. They were family. The DNA we inherited from them isn't just junk either. Some of it seems to have helped our ancestors survive. Genes related to our immune system, our ability to deal with cold weather, and how our skin reacts to sunlight seem to have come from Neanderthals. It makes sense. They had lived in Europe and Asia for hundreds of thousands of years before we showed up. They were adapted to the local diseases, the food, the climate. By mixing with them, our ancestors got a quick genetic upgrade for their new environment. The story didn't stop there. In a cave in Siberia called Denisova, scientists found a tiny piece of a finger bone. It was from a young girl who lived more than 50,000 years ago. It was too small to tell what kind of human she was. So they tried to get DNA from it, they succeeded, and when they read the genetic code, they got another shock. It wasn't a modern human, and it wasn't a Neanderthal. It was something entirely new. A third kind of human. They named them the Denisovans, after the cave where the bone was found. We still don't really know what they looked like. We have that finger bone, a few teeth, and part of a jawbone found in Tibet. That's it. They are a species known almost entirely through their DNA. But their DNA tells a remarkable story. Just like with Neanderthals, they also interbred with our ancestors, but this time the pattern was different. The Denisovan DNA is found in modern populations in Southeast Asia, in Papua New Guinea, and among Aboriginal Australians. Some of these groups have up to 5% Denisovan DNA. It seems our ancestors who moved east out of Africa met and mixed with the Denisovans. And again, The genes they passed on were useful. One Denisovan gene found in people in Tibet helps them survive in high-altitude, low-oxygen environments. The Denisovans, or their ancestors, had clearly lived in these mountains long enough to adapt, and they passed that gift to modern humans who arrived later. So now the picture was even more complex. Our species, Homo sapiens, came out of Africa. In the Middle East and Europe, we met and mixed with Neanderthals. Further east, in Asia, we met and mixed with Denisovans. And in Denisova Cave itself, the DNA told an even wilder story. They found the bones of a girl who had a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. So direct, first-generation proof of these different groups mixing, the ancient world was a human melting pot. This raises a huge question. If we were all interbreeding, were we really different species? In biology, the definition of a species is often a group of animals that can breed and produce fertile offspring. By that definition, maybe we were all just different varieties of the same human species. The lines were blurry. It wasn't about one species replacing another. It was about a web of different human populations, all related, who spent tens of thousands of years separating, adapting to different regions, and then coming back together again. And what about our own origin story? The old idea was that Homo sapiens appeared in a single place in East Africa, probably Ethiopia, around 200,000 years ago. A small group of anatomically modern humans who then went on to conquer the world. This was the Garden of Eden theory. All of us descended from this one founding population. But new fossil discoveries have smashed that idea too. In Morocco, on the other side of the continent, scientists found skulls and tools. At first, they were thought to be about 160,000 years old, but recently they used better dating methods. The result was staggering. The fossils were over 300,000 years old. They were clearly members of our own lineage. They had modern-looking faces, even though the back of their skulls was a bit more primitive. This changes everything. It means our species didn't have a single birthplace. It didn't arise in one spot. Instead, it seems that for a very long time, different groups of early humans were living all across Africa. They were scattered, separated by deserts and forests. They each evolved in slightly different ways. Sometimes they were isolated. Sometimes the climate would change. The desert would turn to grassland, and they would meet and share genes and ideas. Our species wasn't born, it was forged. It was a pan-African process. Modern human features, the flat face, the high forehead, the chin didn't all appear at once in one population. They appeared in different places at different times and slowly came together through this network of mixing groups. The story of our own beginnings is not a straight line from a single point. It's a braided river of genes and cultures that flowed across an entire continent for 100,000 years before coalescing into what we now call Homo sapiens. So, the world of 100,000 years ago was not empty, waiting for us. It was full of humans. There were Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia. There were Denisovans in the East. There were the small-bodied Homo floresiensis, nicknamed hobbits, living on an island in Indonesia. And in Africa, there were our own diverse ancestors, and there were probably others we haven't even found yet. One of the strangest new discoveries comes from a cave system in South Africa called Rising Star. Deep inside a nearly inaccessible chamber, paleoanthropologists found thousands of bones. They belong to a completely new species of human relative, which they named Homo naledi. Homo naledi is a puzzle. It has some very ancient features. Its shoulders were built for climbing, and its brain was small, about the size of an orange. But it also had some surprisingly modern features. Its hands looked capable of fine tool use, and its feet were almost identical to ours, built for long-distance walking. It was a strange mosaic of old and new. The biggest surprise was its age. Given its primitive features, everyone assumed it must be millions of years old. But when they dated the fossils, they were only about 250,000 years old. This was the same time our own species was emerging in other parts of Africa. It means that while our ancestors were developing large brains, this small-brained, strange-bodied cousin was living at the same time. The human family tree wasn't just a trunk, it was full of bizarre side branches that lasted for a very long time. And the story of Homo naledi gets weirder. The bones were found deep inside a dark, dangerous cave, almost impossible to get to. There were no animal bones mixed in with them. It wasn't a den where a predator had dragged its prey. It seems the only way the bodies could have gotten there is if they were put there on purpose. Some scientists believe Homo naledi was deliberately disposing of its dead. This kind of ritual behavior was thought to be unique to big-brained humans like us, and maybe the Neanderthals. To find it in a creature with a brain a third the size of ours is revolutionary. It suggests the roots of complex, symbolic thought may be far deeper and more widespread than we ever imagined. All these discoveries paint a new picture of our past. For most of our history, we were not alone. The world was a real-life Lord of the Rings populated with different kinds of people. We were just one of them. For some reason, we are the only ones left. But we are not a purebred species that came out of nowhere and wiped the slate clean. We are the last survivors of a messy, diverse human family, and we carry the legacy of that lost world inside our own cells. The DNA evidence is still full of mysteries. When scientists analyze the genomes of modern humans, they sometimes find strange stretches of DNA that don't look like they came from us, from Neanderthals or from Denisovans. They look like they came from something else. They call these ghost populations. It's evidence of interbreeding with other ancient human groups whose bones we have not yet found. Imagine that. There were other kinds of humans out there, roaming Africa or Asia, and we met them, we had children with them, and their only remaining trace on this planet is a faint genetic echo in our own blood. The ground beneath our feet is probably full of their bones, waiting to be discovered. Waiting to tell us another chapter of this tangled story. This new understanding changes how we see ourselves. We are not the inevitable result of a march of progress. We are a product of chance, adaptation, and connection. We are a hybrid species, a mosaic. Our success wasn't necessarily because we were smarter or better in some absolute sense. The Neanderthals were incredibly successful. They survived ice ages in Europe for hundreds of thousands of years. The Denisovans adapted to some of the harshest environments on Earth. Maybe our unique advantage was our ability to connect. Our ancestors in Africa formed vast social networks, trading tools and ideas over long distances. When we moved out of Africa, we didn't just kill our relatives, we learned from them and we mixed with them. We absorbed their strengths. Maybe our defining trait wasn't just a big brain, but a willingness to be part of a wider human community. The story is far from over. Each new fossil, each new ancient genome adds another twist. We are learning that the Neanderthals weren't hunched over brutes. They made jewelry from eagle talons. They may have painted on cave walls. They buried their dead. The lines we used to draw between us and them, between advanced and primitive, are getting fuzzier all the time. The latest discovery isn't a single bone. It's a whole new way of thinking about our origins. The story is bigger, more complex, and frankly, more interesting than the simple one we used to tell. It's a story that's still being written. We are just starting to understand the richness of the human past, a past filled with a diversity we can barely imagine. We are the last branch left on a once thriving bush of humanity, and we carry the ghosts of those lost branches with us. Our DNA is an archive, a living history of a lost world. We just need to learn how to read it.